Have you ever noticed how uneasy you become when you have no one to turn to, no voice to consult, no distraction to lean on, and no immediate reassurance that you are on the right path? In those moments when you must decide alone, think alone, and stand alone, something inside you tightens. Doubt grows louder, not because the world is hostile, but because there is no longer a shield between you and yourself. Why does aloneness feel like a threat when it is simply the absence of support? And why did the strongest warriors in history deliberately walk into that very condition? This question is older than any modern system of self-improvement. It lived in the training halls of swordsmen, in mountain temples where monks faced blank walls for years, and in the silent spaces between life and death, where a warrior realized that no one could carry his mind for him. The discomfort you feel in solitude is not weakness. It is exposure. It is the moment the noise fades and you meet the structure of your own mind without decoration. Chapter 1. Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated swordsman who crossed Japan in an era of constant duels and shifting loyalties, understood this confrontation deeply. Near the end of his life, in a cave where he lived in near seclusion, he wrote Dokodo, The Way of Walking Alone. These were not the reflections of a bitter recluse, but the distilled principles of someone who had tested himself against fear, uncertainty, and isolation more than most men ever will. He wrote of accepting everything just the way it is, of not seeking pleasure for its own sake, of not depending on partial feelings, and of holding to the path without relying on others. These teachings do not reject society. They cut the hidden dependency that makes a person fragile. Musashi saw clearly that a mind which cannot stand alone will always tremble when support shifts. A warrior may fight beside others, serve under a lord, or live among family, but if his stability depends on them, then he is never truly steady. The moment circumstances change, his center collapses. Walking alone, in Musashi's sense, means building a mind that does not fall apart when external structures move. It is not isolation from people. It is independence from psychological crutches. This is the foundation of mental strength, and it begins where comfort ends. Ren first encountered Musashi's words during a period of quiet dissatisfaction that he could not easily explain. From the outside, his life appeared ordered. He had responsibilities, routines, and enough interaction to avoid the label of loneliness. Yet beneath this structure was a subtle instability. Every decision, even minor ones, carried hesitation. He compared himself constantly, adjusted his opinions to match the room, and felt uneasy when conversations ended and he returned to silence. He believed he needed more connection, more clarity from others, more confirmation that he was on the right path. What he did not see was that his unease did not come from lack of guidance. It came from never having built an inner reference point strong enough to stand without it. Chapter 2. He began to observe his habits closely. Before making a choice, he searched for someone's perspective. Before trusting his own judgment, he checked how it might be received. Even when alone, his thoughts were not solitary. He rehearsed explanations to imagined audiences, defended his actions against invisible critics, and shaped his desires around how they might be interpreted. His mind was rarely a direct encounter with reality. It was a negotiation with social mirrors. Musashi would have recognized this immediately as dependence, not on people themselves, but on the reflection they provide. A person in this condition is never alone, even in an empty room. He is surrounded by internalized observers. The samurai path did not demand withdrawal from society, but it demanded that a warrior's perception not be ruled by the need for approval. On a battlefield, conditions change without warning. Commands fail. Allies fall. A warrior who cannot act from his own clear observation becomes paralyzed when external guidance disappears. Zen training supported this psychological forging. Monks sat for long hours facing a wall, with no task, no distraction, and no reassurance. This was not ritual for appearance. It was direct exposure to the untrained mind. Without stimulation, the practitioner met restlessness, fear, desire, and doubt in their raw forms. Over time, he learned not to run from them. Stability was not created by removing discomfort, but by staying present within it. Chapter 3. Ren chose a small discipline without announcing it to anyone. Each morning, before speaking, before reading messages, before allowing the world to fill his attention, he sat upright in silence for 15 minutes. There was no guidance, no music, and no attempt to force calm. He simply remained still and observed his breath. The first days were not peaceful. His mind surged with plans, worries, and his unfinished conversations. He felt a strong impulse to reach outward, to restore the familiar exchange of information and reassurance. The silence felt like something essential was missing. Yet slowly he understood that what felt missing was distraction. The anxiety he associated with being alone was not caused by absence of others, but by the presence of an unexamined mind. Without constant input, the noise within became obvious. Musashi's path was not stripping support from a stable person. It was revealing instability that support had concealed. This realization was not comfortable, but it was clarifying. For the first time, Ren saw that he had never truly been alone with himself. He had always filled the space immediately. The practice of sitting was not about achieving peace. It was about learning to remain when peace was not there. In that remaining, a different kind of strength began to form, quiet, unannounced, but real. Chapter 4. As the days continued, Ren noticed patterns he had never seen clearly. His thoughts were not random. They followed familiar tracks. Many revolved around how he appeared to others, how decisions might be judged, and how to avoid disapproval. Very few thoughts arose from direct observation of what was necessary in the moment. This was humbling. He had considered himself independent, yet his inner life was organized around imagined reactions. He began to understand that walking alone did not mean rejecting advice. It meant ceasing to treat others' approval as the foundation of one's decisions. Musashi wrote that one should not regret what one has done. Regret often grows from actions taken against one's own perception to satisfy expectation. When the outcome is poor, blame spreads inward and outward. A person who walks alone acts from considered judgment and accepts the result without self-torment. Ren began applying a rule. Before asking anyone for advice, he first sat quietly and determined his own position. Not a perfect answer, but a clear one. Only then did he seek input, not to replace his view, but to test it. This changed the quality of his interactions. He was no longer empty space waiting to be filled by others' certainty. He became a stable point in conversation. The discomfort of aloneness did not disappear. When decisions carried risk, the old urge to defer responsibility returned. In those moments, he remembered Musashi's life of wandering without permanent backing, often misunderstood, often opposed. Strength did not come from consensus. It came from alignment between perception and action. Zen speaks of a mind that does not cling. When alone, it does not grasp for distraction. When with others, it does not cling to their presence. It remains steady in both. Ren saw that his previous discomfort was attachment to constant validation. Without it, he felt undefined. Now, he stayed with that feeling instead of escaping it. Gradually, undefined became open rather than threatening. Chapter 5. He introduced another practice. Once a week, he spent several hours without social contact, not as withdrawal, but as training. He walked slowly, read a few pages of a book, and sat without devices. At first, loneliness and restlessness appeared quickly. He felt impulses to reach out, to share a thought, to confirm he was still connected. But as he stayed, these urges rose and fell like weather. They were experiences, not commands. He saw how quickly the mind labeled temporary states as problems to be solved. By not reacting, he discovered space between sensation and action. In that space, choice existed. Changes appeared in daily life. In conversations, he no longer rushed to agree to maintain harmony. He listened fully, considered, and sometimes disagreed without agitation. This did not make him cold. It made him present. Others' views no longer felt like threats to his stability, because his stability was not dependent on them. Musashi advised not to collect weapons beyond what is useful. Ren saw this applied to information and influence. He reduced unnecessary inputs, fewer idle opinions, fewer arguments that did not lead to understanding. Attention became something to guard. Chapter 6. The path of aloneness clarified identity. Ren stopped defining himself mainly through roles and expectations. Instead, he measured himself by conduct. Each day he asked quietly, "Did I act from clarity or from fear of standing alone?" This question replaced many vague concerns. He saw that many fear aloneness because it removes excuses. When decisions are collective, responsibility diffuses. When one stands alone inwardly, outcomes point directly back. Musashi's path required accepting this weight. Yet, in accepting it, freedom emerged. No longer bound to constant negotiation with approval, movement became direct. Ren still lived among others, worked with them, cared for them. But inwardly, he leaned less. Praise did not inflate him as before. Criticism did not destabilize him as deeply. His reference point had shifted inward, not to ego, but to steady observation. Walking alone, he discovered, was not a lonely path, but a clear one. The mind, less crowded with imagined observers, grew quieter. In that quiet, perception sharpened. Choices, though still difficult, felt cleaner. Doubt did not vanish, but it no longer ruled. Conclusion. Musashi's life ended in solitude, but not in bitterness. He left the words of instruction. To walk alone is to trust cultivated perception, to accept consequences without complaint, and to refrain from leaning on what cannot be guaranteed to remain. Modern life changes quickly. Systems shift. Support structures fail. Only the person who can remain inwardly upright without constant reinforcement stays steady. Aloneness, once feared, became for Ren a place of return, a base from which to meet the world. In that inner ground, he found a quiet confidence, not loud or declared, but reliable. The path did not promise comfort, it offered solidity. And in a world of constant motion and noise, solidity is rare and deeply needed.